Hello and welcome to Wonder Buzz. This is episode 4 of the hotly anticipated first season of Wonder Buzz. I hope you are having a wonderful week and the space between your panic attacks is steadily growing. Thank you very much for joining me today. This week I have been traveling all over Alabama before it turns into a cast iron skillet that has been left on the fire for too long. The temperatures have been great, the weather and food and scenery have been wonderful. I did have to deal with one really bad weather system, including some tornadoes and a flat tire drama right near the end of that storm. But all in all, I am still very happy to be in Alabama. I have a packed episode for you today. We are going to talk about one of my favorite hobbies while on the road, religious texts. And I have my very first interview this week with Tom Haushalter. He's from Portland, Maine. He's a super cool guy. And as I will reference many times, he has an incredible head of hair. So let's dive right in. I love reading those signs outside of churches, especially in small towns and especially in the South. There's something about the confidence it takes to put your best Jesus pun out there for every passing driver to read at 45 miles an hour. And when I'm traveling in the South, it feels like there are more churches per minute of road time. So you get a lot of really good content. By the time you get through a town, you've seen 5 Baptist church signs, 4 Methodist, a Presbyterian, and a rogue non-denominational thing that looked like somebody's garage. There has to be some kind of subreddit for pastors or a group text or somewhere where they swap their greatest hits. There's some kind of holy meme exchange going on here because I imagine them writing to each other, hey, Pastor Gary, try this one, crushing over here. Because you see a few themes and even the same message on some of the signs as you move through towns. A couple that recently caught my eye and blessed my little heart. This one, which said, daylight savings time changes time. Jesus Christ changes lives. I like this one because it's a public service announcement, reminding people to move their clocks, and then also the Jesus thing. Really straightforward, but catchy. Sometimes they're straight threats. This one I saw 2 days ago, it says, there's a limit to God's patience. So that's a flat out, get your butt in the pew or things are going to get real. And how about this little gem? Be a serial killer, kill sin every Sunday. This pastor is not subtle. He has been listening to way too many true crime podcasts. And I am sure he is also a big fan of Mindhunter. It's a great show, by the way, if you haven't seen it. I do want to attend this church because I feel like I could really talk about cold case files with him. I feel like that's a place we could connect. As I've been driving this week, I've been thinking about a few of my own variations. Here's one for you. Text while reading this to meet Jesus. It's a good one, right? How about baptisms on sale? No money down, details inside. I like this because I see a lot of these churches next to paycheck loan places. So I feel like there's a good tie in there. Maybe I'm inspired by the serial killer one here, but how about if you don't like our sermon, wait until you hear the screams. I feel like that could get people's attention. Send me some of your favorites, maybe some that you've seen out there in the wild, or make up your own. And if this text chain doesn't exist or this subreddit doesn't exist, we can start one. Today on Wonder Buzz, I'm joined by a man of many talents, a writer, a poet, an editor, an actor, a content and marketing wizard, and honestly, one of the finest heads of hair I've ever known, Tom Haushalter. Welcome to Wonder Buzz.
It's a shame we can't showcase the hair.
Maybe we can do a profile on just the hair. I'll work on that. First things first, because I want to introduce you to the audience. Tell me where in the world we find you today. Where are you sitting?
You find me in Portland, Maine, at home. I live here with my family. We've been here about 6 odd years, making our life in this beautiful place.
I'm missing spring up in New England and Maine.
I hear you. We're not quite there. There's, as all New Englanders know, there's another 5th season we must contend with before spring.
Yeah.
It is very much mud season, at least in this part of Maine. Rain all week, but the daffodils are peaking up.
Like a lot of people I feel like I'm drawn to or I'm interested in, you're really hard to explain. I mean that as a compliment.
Yeah,
I've
by
just since I've
design,
known you
by design.
yeah. Since I've known you, I feel like you're very curious about everything. And from the serious, we've had some serious conversations to the seriously absurd. And I'm curious if you think about it the same way, like where that started for you. Have you always been a curious kid? Were you someone that always had 1,000 questions about everything?
It's either undiagnosed ADHD or something like that, or a deep and abiding curiosity for so many things. I have, as you might expect from the earliest age, have wanted to get my paws into everything I could. I'm a curious person at heart. I like to play. I like to explore new ground, and I think it's kept me. Well, I don't want to dive into what are the limitations of this kind of way of living and being a creative. But if it seems like I do everything and nothing at the same time, it's because I can't decide what I
Yeah.
want to be. And I think I'm halfway through this life if I'm lucky, and it's I think served me pretty well to maintain this kind of fount of curiosity, and that ranges from my creative life to my active life in terms of sports and learning how it is to live a healthy and happy and interesting and interested life with my family.
I know I totally love and appreciate that answer because it resonates with me too, especially the part about, I don't know, feeling like there's not enough life to do all the things that you might be interested in doing.
Yeah, as much as, and I was thinking about this before we hop on the call here, what how my creative life is changing and evolving over time. And you're always up against that one inescapable fact, which is the clock running out, not just on your life, but on your day, on the hours in a day that you don't have enough of to do all the things you want to do. I think in my life, I have run aground with some of my creative efforts because I have linked it too much to the clock and to this notion of productivity and output and outcome. And it is to the detriment of the joy of the process. So I'm learning how to get around that differently these days.
I got the full research team working on
Yeah.
background on you. So, for context for everyone, you
Mhm.
have been a poetry editor. You have your MFA in poetry from Columbia. Excuse me very much. You have a BA in English from
Mhm.
Wittenberg. The written word seems to have been something that maybe early on was central, maybe still is to you as far as one of your main creative outlets or one of the touchstones for you. Is that fair to say? Or what's your relationship with that now?
I've always wanted to write things. Poetry came a little bit later. I wasn't one of those 6-year-olds who had found poems to be, found a home in poems that young. It came more in the college years. I was writing stories even before, but I think the big turning point was when my family got the first computer and that word processor made it. I could scale my
Mhm.
storytelling, and I was hammering out short stories and little comedic short pieces. It felt like on a nightly basis. I felt so much in the skin of a writer at that point and rode that wave through those early years and into when I found poetry and as the right fit for the expression I was wanting to do. That turned into an opportunity that got me into an MFA program and this full embodiment of the writer's life. And embodiment's a big thing that I've come to realize that maybe has changed for me in recent years. In the MFA for 2 years, I get to live outside of time in a way, the constraints of time, and got to walk around. I always talk about I walked around with lines and images in my head through the streets of New York City, collecting these images and snippets and crafting them into these poems. That was a gift for 2 years to be able to do that. And then when I was cast out there back into the world, into a world that's not asking for your poems, I remember the distress I felt being outside the confines and the comfort of the academy, which encourages that kind of immersion. I think in the time since then, I've struggled at different times to maintain that poet's immersion with his material and with his, I don't know, I hate to say imagination, but it's something like that. Being outside of time to wait and to discover what it is you want to say. And I've dealt with it in different ways. I know there are people who would tell me, find structured time in your life to do these things. But I found myself making more excuses, and that's a problem in and of itself.
Does it tie a little bit back to that thing you mentioned earlier too of productivity or output, or
Yeah.
if you're not publishing X amount of poems and they're not having X amount of success?
I think in the MFA, there is this culture of success that have to put together a collection and get the chapbook together. After you get the individual poems published, you get the chapbook together. And that's usually the stepping stone to getting your first full collection together. It's capitalist in and of itself. You're trying to move yourself into the ranks and get that teaching job. And I don't know, very early on, I felt like I'm not interested in that. And I felt the distress about it. I'm like, what am I doing this for? Fortunately, I had the opportunity to teach some poetry workshops to a particular age group, to say retirement age folks. And that was one of the most beautiful periods of my poetry life, was getting to be in a classroom with these folks who probably hadn't touched poems since they were young people. And for them to discover that it's for everyone, that they have this lifetime of material to draw from. And to be able to show them how to tap into that was really exciting and rewarding. And to see these people just surprise themselves that they made these poems, and not just garden variety poems about happily traipsing through the New England woods, but bringing themselves and using these landscapes to reflect and provoke something within them in a way that could lead to some kind of revelation. And I thought, it was wonderful to see that they couldn't have imagined being able to do that.
I came across something that you wrote, and it has stayed with me. It's called Spaghetti Western, so I don't know if you remember that. I found it to be very cinematic, but also very brutal at the same time. So I want to read that. This is Spaghetti Western. Several trains whistle at once through Mechanicsburg, where winds curl the acreage and fences resemble sails. Time tends to things slowly. A hand deliberately dipping twine in and out of a drum of blue wax. I haven't for 1 minute forgotten what you told me, how men are made. They hand a boy the reins of a chariot and insist he not return till he's injured himself. I'm afraid, then, you'd be considerably ashamed of me should you resurface. No one loves anyone just as they are. That last line is brutal.
Yeah, it is.
In a beautiful way. There's so much in this for me personally of fathers and son and masculinity and disappointment and all kinds of things in there. I'm curious what Matt sparks in you right now.
Yeah, it's great to hear that again. I wrote that when I was at Columbia. One of the first things I did there, I had the good fortune of having that published pretty quickly, and then somebody picked it up on one of these poetry daily websites. I think it's probably where it lives now. And so it got this. And back then, in those days, to get a poem online felt strange.
Yeah.
Because it was all still very print based. But I quickly realized, oh my God, I just multiplied my audience. And it was imminently shareable, and people discovered it that I never imagined would discover it. What technically I was trying to do was create moments that throw you. And certainly that last line, I think the instruction might have been end on a line and don't explain it. That was a fun tactic of my teacher at Columbia, Lucy Brock-Broido, worth mentioning. She asked us to end the poem on a line that sends you off into another stratosphere. And don't explain it, but it has to belong as well. It has to fit the mood. And certainly I've set up the stakes on this, along this kind of like rugged landscape in this kind of liminal space in Ohio where there are railroads. And there was mournfulness here, there was loss. And I have that personally in my mind, but you have to leave that kind of ambiguous for the reader to be able to set foot in a town that they don't know and find their way around.
And I love that you can translate that so well in so few lines in poetry. I think that's a really powerful thing.
Another poet named Richard Hugo wrote a lot about towns he'd only just walked into, and for the sake of the poem, created the world that he wanted it to be, and made these wild assumptions about the people there and the conflicts there. And it's a fascinating exercise, because I think we probably all do it when we pass through places. Like, what's going on?
Hey Wonderbuzz listeners, this is me interrupting me to tell you about a special offer that is only available for Wonderbuzz podcast listeners. Visit nathanlarson.com to get 20% off and free shipping on all orders. Just use the promo code Wonderbuzz at checkout. That is 20% off all orders and free shipping when you use promo code Wonderbuzz at checkout. nathanlarson.com has hundreds of fine art photos available with multiple print options, whether you are looking for landscapes, abstracts, travel, wildlife, or still life photos. Use promo code WonderBuzz for 20% off and free shipping. Thanks so much, and now back to me. I came through this really small town last night and I realized I was really low on fuel. So I pulled into this gas station that was more of a pizza restaurant. I think they accidentally had a gas pump. It felt like they really had forgotten they had a gas pump because I walked in and they asked me for my pizza order and I said, no, I would like gas. I walked into the middle of a conversation. There was 3 or 4 people who had just gotten off work there, and their normal routine was to come in every night and grab their pizzas, and the women behind the counter knew them incredibly well, and I landed in the middle of their conversation, and immediately I started painting all these pictures of these people in this town and listening
Right.
to these stories, and yeah, it's incredible. It's one of the most interesting things about traveling the way I do. One of the best lines I heard recently traveling was these 2 women were talking outside of a restaurant, and one woman said to the other woman, "What's your dream job?" And the other woman said, "I don't dream of labor." And I thought, that's amazing. Like,
That's
when people
hilarious.
ask you what your dream job is, she's like, "Why would I waste my dreams thinking about work?" I don't dream of labor.
I
Oh, that's a gem. I love that.
love it.
Okay, so I'm going to move us to another creative pursuit that you have in your life. I was one of the people that was signing the petitions because you left the stage 20 years ago. You stopped acting. There was a huge demand in the public for you to get back on stage. I was circulating things on change.org. I know a lot of us
Yeah.
were. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
now you
Yeah.
have come back to acting. And I would love to hear about what drew you back.
Yeah. The hundreds of people chanting outside my house got to be a little too much after so many weeks.
I don't know if we've ever spoken about this before, but I come from that world. I
I
was
know. I know.
immersed quite heavily in that world for a long time. I feel like it's never too far away from me, even though
Yeah.
I haven't done it in a long time. So when I saw that you were acting again, I was extremely excited for you, and I thought it was really cool that you were getting back to it.
Yeah. Thank you. What kept me away for so long, for over 20 years, having done it through high school and college? And that was a big part of my identity then, was doing stage acting. And I think it's a combination of that season of life where it didn't seem to be something I could confidently commit to. So the commitments, you're weeks at a time, you're at a theater for 3 hours every night, and then the sort of the crescendo weekends of the run of the show. It's a lot to ask family that you're maybe with, or anybody in your life to that you feel responsibility to. And again, it's that limited amount of time that we're working with. So I think that's partly to explain these different phases and stages of my life. There was a part of me that also felt like that was something I did in school. It was an activity locked away there. Wasn't that fun? I think it's important because when I turned to writing and took the leap to go to get my graduate degree, there was again that capitalist intent of I need to make a career out of this. I'm committing to this. I'm focused on this. Yeah, that lucrative poetry career I was chasing. I think I hadn't yet decoupled creativity with that capitalistic intent. And I think to be an actor, to tell myself I wanted to do acting in my 20s would have been a shift in, career priorities or something. It would have had to be tied to that in some way. And I knew I didn't want that life.
Right.
Um, I think that terrified me. And so I just left it behind. But always enjoying doing characters and doing voices and being a goof and a clown, especially with my young kid over the years, flexing that muscle in ways that were very much on my own terms. But I think what really turned for me, still tied to this kind of exit or at least postponement of my writing life, I think during pandemic, what I was experiencing was this two tensions. One was like in my work life, I do writing, I do content. And so there was creative capital being spent in my writing
Yeah.
life on this job and leaving me with very little to work with in my off hours. And again, the pressure and the endlessness and the all of the dread of that time, I think also took a toll on me. And there was this, I think, period of just feeling totally disembodied from creativity. We were just shells living at home in this digital environment, and I needed to be pushed out of that state and back into my body to find my creative self again. And I'll give credit to my wife. She said, you need to go try out for a play. She sent
Yeah.
me an audition. She sent me an audition notice. I went out for a play. I did it and had a great experience at the audition. It turned out they had to cancel that play because the director had an issue, but I had broken through and I was encouraged by that director to come out again, come out to the next one. And I did, and I got really fortunate and got a really fun, juicy part. in local community production. And that has, in the last year, sent me into a whole new world of possibilities. And I've been able to be part of a handful of productions. I just closed one last week. And you catch me this week in that predictable malaise, that kind of
Yes, the slump.
withdrawal. I have no self-worth. I don't know something to let grab onto.
Nobody
And
has clapped for me in the last 24
right.
hours.
Yeah, not only that, but it's what I've discovered about the stage. What's been such a wonderful thing to see about theater in 20 years later is that it hasn't changed. Certainly, I think some of the sound and tech side can be automated, but the making of a show
Yeah.
is the same as it ever was, and that is so comforting. And it takes showing up, it takes being on that stage in person, fully in your body, and when you step on that stage, you're outside of time in a way, and that is something I've just had the most fun relearning.
Acting is this really wonderful creative sport of sharing and bouncing things around and active listening and really participating and building something creative
Hmm.
with people. So
Yeah,
those are definitely different muscles to flex, but to me, they always come back to the words, the
sure.
power of what you're saying, whether you've written it or whether it's somebody else's words. So I think it's really cool. Obviously, two very different ways of expressing yourself, but so much fun. So, are you going to be trying out for plays the rest of the year as well?
Yeah, I have some opportunities this spring and summer. I can't
Great.
say anything more about that, but
Yeah, yeah.
I do have a role on the books for this November that I'm very excited about. To be honest, all I really wanted to do was be on SNL. Yeah, and sketch comedy come very naturally to me. Two of the three plays I've done over the past year have been that kind of just being able to chew the scenery in really gorgeous ways. And I just finished a more dramatic role, but well-known character in the dramatic sense, Aslan from Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yep.
That was such a treat to be able. It felt like a sacred duty to play this character. Definitely had to tone down facial expressions and the head wagging and all of the other shtick that I tend to layer onto some of my characters. I'll be getting back to my comedic roots with a comedic take on Dracula this fall. So
Wonderful.
I'm really excited about that.
That's great. So lots of exciting things coming up. That's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so looking forward to it. I can't wait to, like I just said, I'm in the in-between zone right now, and I can't wait to step back into something.
Yeah.
Like I used to carry poems and lines around in my head. The same goes for the acting process and the character development process. It's a headspace to the frustration of my wife and daughter who will hear me talking to myself
There's a lot of
in
Dracula.
Romanian.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of Dracula coming their way.
Yeah,
There's something that catches me about what you're saying too about a bit about momentum. We were talking about that with poetry and having the momentum of your MFA program and probably producing a lot because of that. And now with acting, you took that initial step to do that first audition, and there's a bit of momentum now that builds as you get to experience being on stage again and working with other actors. Do you feel like there's anything to momentum and creativity? Is there anything that you've learned about that?
definitely. Yeah, I definitely feel that in that space right now. I want to be careful not to be wooed by opportunity for its own sake, because somebody wants me in their play. I want to learn to be selective and careful about things I want to do that will fulfill me. That'll be challenging. I like switching gears and thinking about a type of role that I haven't done before, and rather than the sort of sticking on this kind of typecast route. Even though after some nice local regional success, I think, getting more attention. I still maintain this hope that it won't become too aspirational as to be something that I need to worry about to support myself, or that it becomes that kind of professional pursuit. So I can keep it purely fun. If I'm not having fun, that doesn't mean it can't be challenging, but I don't have high standards for it. They want it to be good. That's an important distinction, right? It's not, to take it seriously doesn't mean it has to become everything in the world.
Makes total sense to me. Yeah. And I think there's a tension. We could do a whole conversation about the tension between your creative pursuits being commercialized. And I think social media has done a real number on all of us in this area, right? Because everything becomes about likes and followers and growth. And sometimes you just want to make some stuff and share it without all of the burden of those things on top of it. That is a whole topic that I think about quite a bit. And certainly it's a It's like a black hole sucking, I think, creative people into it and
Yeah.
a meat
Yeah.
grinder on the inside.
Yeah.
I want to give you the opportunity just to ask me anything about what I'm doing with this podcast or what I'm doing with van life.
I know you're living the van life. You're traveling all over. Nobody knows really where you are, Dave. Most of us are left to be surprised where you turn up next. I think somebody who knows that when you pull out, you don't always know which direction you're going to turn at the next intersection. Do you leave it to chance? And is there any truth to that? And how do you get to where you're going? And is it always intentional or is it sometimes by surprise?
That is a factual statement. I think what that story is referring to is when I initially started van life, I got to the end of my driveway and I flipped a coin with whether to go right or left. And that was a bit symbolic, but I kept doing it. So easily for the first 8 months, when I would get to intersections, I would just flip a coin. And that kind of set the tone for this entire adventure that I'm on right now. And that is generally the theme. I've just in this last week started in northern Alabama with every intention of driving through Alabama. And now I've just spent the entire week in Alabama. It happens to me all the time, or that little town that I was telling you about earlier that I really was enamored with last night. So I found a place to stay and I'm hanging out in that town all day today. And then there are times when I am very purposely trying to get somewhere to do something. I went to Alaska summer of last year and wanted to be up at the Arctic Ocean and wanted to be in Alaska at a certain time of year. So sometimes I am trying to get to an area. That's probably the best part about this lifestyle is if you get someplace and you don't like it, you can leave. And if you get someplace and you love it, you can stay for as long as you want. That part's pretty good.
That's great.
I can tell you about a whole bunch of stuff that is not as sexy for van life, but that part's pretty good. Okay, to wrap up our interview today, I'm going to do something I'm trying out called Quick Cues, which is really 10 questions I've written for you. You're not going to answer all 10. You're just going to read out maybe 1, 2, or 3 numbers, depending on how much time it takes for us. And I'll just read you the question associated with that number, and we'll get your hot take on it. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Okay, so you can give me any number between 1 and 10. I'm just going to read what I've written.
Number 4.
Number 4, here we go. Oh, okay, this gets dark very quick. You die. That's how the question starts. Sorry to go there so quickly.
I'm here for it.
Okay, so you die, but you get to haunt one writer's pen for all of eternity. Who are you going to ghostwrite for from the beyond?
Do they have to be living now?
No, it can be anything you want. No rules for quick cues.
I don't know. I'm surrounded by my books right now. And the first one I looked at, the poet who turned into a novelist, but whose books I'm just like crazy about, Ben Lerner.
Ben Lerner.
If I could write like Ben Lerner, leaving the Atocha station, 10:04. What's the Topeka, Kansas one? The Topeka School? Is that what it's called? I love that one too.
I've been looking for some good book recommendations, so this is very helpful for me.
Yeah.
All right. That was a very good quick cue. Give me another number.
8.
8. Okay. What's one word you love so much that you overuse it? And what's one word you wish you could permanently have retired from the English language? I think I have an answer for that second one now I'm reading this out loud.
I am prone to these filler adverbs, and I hate to use, but I use them a lot. Actually, like the sort of for emphasis or for punctuation like that on a point of view. And I want to train myself to use fewer of those kind of garbage adverbs in my speech.
And one word that you would like to see retired.
You got me.
I'm going to give you mine because as I was reading this question out loud to you, I thought, oh, I have one right now. I feel if we as a country could come together, and I feel like we can do this. I feel like no matter what your party divides are, politics are, that we as a country can come together and really focus. We can stop saying game changer. I'm done with game changer. This taco was a game changer. Like it's too much for me.
Yeah, I think and generally this overuse of superlatives.
Yeah, okay.
Everything is amazing.
Yeah, everything is amazing. I do that all the time.
I don't know if it's a bad thing that people feel joy and feel this kind of uplift about things, but is it really that amazing?
Is exactly.
Are you just trying to make me feel good?
And is that ballpoint pen really a game changer? These are the things that one just really catches me daily. I feel like I'm getting that one.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do one more question in quick cues, and then I will let you go back to your Dracula preparations.
Thank you. We're going to jump back to number 3.
If someone listening today is stuck creatively, what's one piece of advice that you would share with them?
Change your location. Get out of the place you're in, and if it's too quiet, go to a place where it's full of noise, because you might be surprised by what you pick up around you, or vice versa. Do the complete opposite of what you're doing. I think if it helps to shake up you physically sit, surprise yourself, but go as far as you can away from where you are.
From your mouth to my life.
Yeah.
That's some
Yeah.
advice that I took to heart. So I really love that advice. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate your time today. This has been wonderful for me, very interesting. And also, I love touching base with other people who are creative, but also struggling with creativity at times. It's really fun to talk about that. I would say that this discussion with you has been a real game changer for me.
It's been amazing for me. Yeah.
Truly amazing. An amazing game changer. This is
Okay.
Tom Haushalter, everybody, writer, poet, man of dangerous hair volumes. Thank you very much, Tom. This has been a joy. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Nate. You too.
Thank you so much for joining me on Wonderbuzz today. I hope you enjoyed meeting Tom. I always find it reassuring to meet and talk to other people who also have no idea what they want to be when they grow up. That feeling, I don't think, has anything to do with whether you are a poet or an actor or a photographer. I think it is something we should all aspire to more, that childlike sense of wanting to discover everything. I brought that approach to Ben & Jerry's one fateful summer in college, where I tried to use my childlike wonder to discover every single flavor that Ben & Jerry's offered. So you can use it in all aspects of your life. If you would like to view my photography or buy prints, head over to my website at nathanlarson.com. Or if you'd like to experience the mind flatulence that is social media, you can find me everywhere, including at Nathan Larson Photo on Instagram. If you have any questions or comments for me, reach out at podcast@nathanlarson.com. And you'll also find a link in the show notes to support the podcast. Any little bit helps. Keep exploring, stay curious, and I'll see you on the next episode of Wonderbuzz.